Pelham, it's time to shine. This townhouse has been known for many strange things.
Welcome to episode 1 of the Townhouse. This is our first attempt at this particular podcast, so this is going to be a little bit of a learning experience for us here. My name is Xavier. We're going to go ahead and start with introductions, just sort of go around the room. Is that good with you guys?
It's good with me.
Good.
All right. So I'm Xavier. I am a trader working in the stock market, just giving a little bit of an idea of sort of what I do. I'm also a millennial, as we all are. And let's just go around the room. Gavin, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'm Gavin. I'm a programmer, so a little bit different than what Xavier's doing, but I can keep it up to date with the tech news and things like that.
I'm Anthony. I'm a civil engineer. I'm a lot a bit different than what Xavier and Gavin do. I basically make sure that there are no hazards to the people of the world.
Okay, so this is the Townhouse. Xavier, Gavin, Anthony. We'll be maybe having a regular on here, Dan, who was not able to join us today. But just to start off, since this is episode 1 of hopefully many episodes to come, let's start off with what we are wanting this podcast to be about, and maybe a little bit about what we can expect and what you can expect as someone who hopefully will be a regular listener to this podcast. Gavin, do you want to sort of give an overview of what you expect from this experience?
Yeah, I think we'll try to keep it light, go over a few funny news stories from the week, maybe some serious news stories as well. Talk about a little bit of random stuff from our lives. I mean, everybody kind of thinks their own lives are interesting, and so, we're no different, but there are some fun things that happen from time to time that we get a good laugh out of, and we hope you guys do too. We're going to do other things, beer of the week. Xavier has a tradition of coming over here and drinking a beer with us, and he's usually the one who provides it, so we're
Props to Xavier.
Okay, Anthony, want to sort of give a high level of what you can expect out of this and what you're sort of the direction that you're wanting to take this whole thing?
Sure thing, Xavier. Thank you. I would like to get out of this to open up discussion about certain topics, any topic, in fact. Also, to bring humor, as Gavin said. I think laughter is medicine of the world. To be cliche.
Yeah, very cliche.
Yeah, I would agree with Gavin and Anthony on this one. Definitely try to keep it light, trying to stay away from anything that would be potentially controversial. So try to keep it away from politics or anything like that. But we're also, just a couple friends, enjoy hanging out, having a good time together. And so we're going to focus in on our areas of interest and things that we think are entertaining, funny, fun.
So, one of the things we might want to talk about is why are we calling it the Townhouse? What significance does that have in our lives?
True. Why are we calling it the Townhouse?
Well, it's funny you should mention that. But, so the Townhouse goes back to our good old college days. Gavin and I went to a little school called Merrimack College, home of the Warriors.
Excuse me,
Go
I also
Warriors.
attended that college with you.
Xavier made regular appearances, and he is...
He slept on our couch.
Yeah. Our
I was there for the important events.
Yeah,
that is true.
Homecoming, spring weekend, Beer
Every
Olympics.
weekend.
Every weekend.
Yeah, true. Every single weekend. Starting, junior year, pretty much?
Pretty much, straight through till graduation. I almost walked with you.
You were an honorary Merrimack
True, yeah,
College student.
You
came
came
to
4 more
homecoming.
credits. That was all it took.
That is true.
But yeah, so the Townhouse is actually the name of an original song that Anthony wrote, and maybe someday we'll reveal the full thing on here.
Correct.
For now, we'll keep it to just the intro of our podcast, and you'll have the pleasure or displeasure of hearing it on a regular basis.
That is true. So a little background on that is I'm a musician myself, or what I can hope to consider myself to be a musician, where I enjoy making music. I like to play around on GarageBand and see if I can come up with any cool beats, cool rhythms, and one day couple different instruments came together, created a little masterpiece, I like to call. And it was named after the townhouse that we lived in, or at least I lived in, back in college.
Yeah.
Which,
As a brief aside, I am somewhat of a scientist myself.
oh, well, congratulations.
But yeah, that is the origin of the name Townhouse. So just inspired by Anthony's artistry.
Yes, thank you.
It was a big hit at Merrimack College back in the day.
That
You
is-
ask anyone who was from our class, they knew that song.
They knew the
very
song well, you know.
Anyone who hung out with Gavin and Anthony, which was a relatively small group of intimate friends.
Okay.
Well,
Easy.
you know, it was bigger than, you know.
What do we know?
Okay, so we've got the introductions, we've got the general idea of where this podcast is heading and what we plan to get from it and pass along. So I would say now we're going to jump into the news stories. So just interesting headlines that are not necessarily top headline news, but notable enough for us to mention on here, and maybe something that you didn't hear at the top of CNN, Fox News, New York Times, or any of those top news providers there.
Drudge Report.
Drudge. Okay, calm down. All right, so Gavin, you wanna start us off with this first headline here?
Oh boy. So today we're looking at Virginia man accused of rubbing his ass on produce. So let's go over here. So this one is from the Huffington Post. Virginia man accused of rubbing produce on buttocks and putting it back on shelves.
Wow, that's a pretty shitty thing to do, if I do say so.
Zing!
Should we? I think something we should do is like
Sound
a little
effects.
dad joke
yes,
counter. You know,
Daddy.
every time
Oh,
Anthony makes a dad
yes.
joke, we'll do a little.
Oh, yes, Daddy.
This
Yeah.
pleases me.
Yeah.
So, where is someone coming from with this? Like, what is the
What did they catch
lead
them
up?
on?
What is the build up to this action? Do you just one day wake up one morning and be like, I know what I'm doing this Saturday?
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, what would...
You could see that. You could just wake up one morning and be like, you know what, I'm bored. Time to
Well,
head
I
down to the
personally
local market
couldn't
basket.
see that, but there are some people in this world who are probably like, you know what, I'm gonna go down to my local grocery market and put a fruit on my butt.
Do you think that's like
Not a normal thing, for sure, no. I mean, it's
No?
coming from Virginia, after all.
Whoa, calm down now. Most of our listeners are in Virginia.
True.
All of our listeners are in Virginia. Oh, man.
But yeah, like, how do you? What motivates that? Like, you go to the
Extreme
store-
levels of boredom.
Either that,
gonna leave
or
it
he
at
was
that.
greatly upset. He could have been going through a breakup. Maybe his girlfriend worked at this produce market, and he was like, you know what? I'm gonna get even with her. And
So
then-
wait, you're saying like how you deal with stress in your life is to go to the store and put random fruits and vegetables like up your ass?
I would say
That's not quite what
I
you
would
did,
say
but-
everyone everyone has their own approach. Everyone has their own thing that entertains them. But no, I think that that boredom's going to play a role there. I mean, why are we making a podcast? It's because we, are wanting something entertaining to do. It's a rush. It's, I don't know.
It was an
something that's
idea.
fun.
True, yeah. I mean, it was an idea we had while we were on a road trip.
Very
Well,
true.
And this could be the reason why he decided to do this. He could have been on a road trip, had the idea, could have been talking about it with his buddies sitting in their living room.
Hey guys, guess what I'm gonna do next weekend?
And they're like, nah, you won't.
All right. Well, I mean,
He did.
sexual
I think it's
fantasy.
time to move on from that. Definitely interesting, and makes you
Sad.
second guess
Well-
next time you're in the produce aisle of the supermarket. But let's go on to
Always wash your
maybe
fruit.
other things that are standing out in our news today.
Always wash your fruit.
Well, how about this? We'll pose the question of the week for anybody who ends up listening to this. What's the nastiest thing you've done or somebody you know has done in a public place?
Ooh.
I think that could be interesting to discuss maybe next time or at some point in the future.
That is
But,
a good question.
Yeah, let's talk about some quick news right now. So, Tilray stock doubled today. When we're recording this is September 19th of 2018. Xavier, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that
the stock
particularly stood out to me as someone who works in the stock trading realm. I just find it shocking. I mean, I watch companies like this just hit all-time highs, and the only thing that I can think is, this is it. This is the peak. It's going down from here. And I thought that with Tilray. I saw it as, $20 just a few months ago, and I saw it hit, high at 150, and I was like, okay, this is the end.
Question for you. Now, people who watch stocks closely, could you call them stalkers?
Oh, yes, Daddy.
Okay, wow, let's derail this then, shall we?
Is that another dad joke?
Oh, yes,
Ding
Daddy.
on the...
Ding,
We'll have to
there's
get that sound
two.
effect.
That's two.
Yes.
Keep 'em coming.
Yeah, okay, so Anthony
man.
is going to be our dad joke king here.
Oh, yes, Daddy.
With Tilray, yeah, it's surprising. I'm not really sure where this is coming from because I mean, there's a lot of marijuana stocks in the industry right now, and none of them are doing as well as Tilray is doing. It's just unprecedented, and it's kind of I almost would compare it to the Bitcoin trends where it just kept going up with no end in sight, and I'm sure there will be a end point to this, and it will peak at a certain point, but it's just been an amazing run so far, and an amazing run especially today.
Yeah, weird that it just hops on that exponential growth curve, and you keep thinking it's going to level off, and next thing you know, $20, $100, $200.
All right, but I don't have any particular insight on this one, unfortunately. If I knew anything about Tilray stock, I would have bought it myself, and I unfortunately didn't. So hindsight's 20/20, right? But next item on the agenda, let's jump into this one because as much as I love stocks, this one's far more near and dear to my heart. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is coming out beginning of October. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pumped for this. I love Assassin's Creed.
The sixth one or the seventh one?
Oh, Jesus, I don't even know.
I don't know if, Assassin's Creed has made a lot of games that didn't make it mainstream.
Is Michael Fassbender in this one?
I don't think it's a movie.
Good.
I
shouldn't.
think
Wait,
it's a
is
video
that how you
game.
pronounce his name?
According to a couple people who have said it, it's Fassbender, or as I used to call it, Fassbender.
That's what
I
I thought.
thought it was Fassbender.
But Fassbender sounds more intellectually correct.
I guess
It sounds
so.
like you're like, oh.
Like, that guy knows what he's talking
Exactly.
about. Michael Fassbender.
Like when you say vase or do you say vase? It's
I
like
say
Michael
vase.
Tomato, tomato.
Fassbender. Exactly.
All right, but let's bring this back on track here. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Do you guys know anything about this? I have a little bit of insight on what's coming up, and I have my own thoughts on it, but I wanted to know if you guys
I've seen
were aware.
the cover of it, so I know it looks like, what are they called?
I mean, the graphics are getting really good.
That is true.
Like,
the graphics are...
From the previews and stuff, just the cover art and everything. I just replayed Assassin's Creed 3 pretty recently, and I know they're remastering it soon, but even that, the detail was already pretty high, and that was a
True. When did that game
relatively
come out?
low-
2010?
Jesus.
Around then, yeah, it was 8 years ago.
Which is pretty good for graphics.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I just somewhat recently finished up Assassin's Creed Origins, which I've always loved Egypt, so I had a lot of fun with this one.
I'm gonna finish it myself.
I'll just give you my thoughts on this. So I'm going to start by saying Assassin's Creed. I love Assassin's Creed. I love the gameplay, the storylines. And I played Assassin's Creed, the first one. I got into Assassin's Creed 2, the Ezio story. Went on and played Assassin's Creed 3, then played Assassin's Creed Black Flag, I think is what it's
the
called.
pirate
The
one. I
pirate
played
themed
that one actually for a little bit.
Yeah? What were your thoughts?
Well, I didn't make it that far in,
sad.
I don't...
I'll be honest. It's either Origins or Black Flag for me in terms of they're sort of almost tied for my favorite. Mostly Black Flag because of
Pirates,
the
and you
theming.
enjoy
I
pirates.
love pirates. And then the Origins just because there's so much game there. It was a great time for me. But what the issue that I see with the new Assassin's Creed, and don't get me wrong, I'm super pumped for it, it's going to be more of a typical role-playing game. And so you have character customization, which is a departure from playing, let's say, Ezio or one of the other title characters in the Assassin's Creed story. You create your own character, you customize them, design them, pick male, female character, etc. And it's just definitely a different approach to the game as a whole. So that is where I sort of have had concerns, and then beyond that, you look at the artwork for it, the promotions for it. It's a Spartan warrior, doing some kind of a big jump to kill something. I think that's cool, but it's definitely a departure from the traditional idea of what Assassin's Creed is and has
behind
been.
It. True.
I feel like you can only go so far before you got to pivot a little bit though with games. Like they've done the storyline of like Altair, Ezio, Connor. You go through all the different characters throughout the years, and you're following a certain storyline, but I feel like, with the different mechanics that make Assassin's Creed fun, like, it has a very different fight style than most games. The exploration aspect, like, I think Assassin's Creed Origins had a 5 times bigger map than any previous Assassin's Creed. Like, that's just crazy. That you can give that much game to people, and you're following a storyline in that sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, role-playing games can be fun, and there are a lot of big hits out there. Obviously, Final Fantasy has gone through so many iterations, as has, like, Fallout is another big one.
I have a
Open world.
love-hate relationship with Final Fantasy. Haven't touched it since PlayStation 2, but I just recall...
PlayStation 2.
PlayStation 2, I know, that's years ago, but it was like Final Fantasy, like, I don't know, 10 or 11, whatever version it was, and I just remember I got to a certain point in the game, and I was way under-leveled for the level of gameplay. Like, the gameplay scaled up, and the difficulty scaled up far faster than my characters were able to level up, and that was kind of a turn-off for me, where you couldn't keep up with the upgrading of the game. I have limited experience with that beyond that point, and it's definitely years old, so I probably shouldn't speak further on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have to look forward to is the fact that Assassin's Creed has put out a lot of good games. Like, there have been a lot of consistently good games. People like the parkour, the fighting, the
parkour, yeah.
The different the open world concept. So I think, it still shows promise, even if they're deviating a little bit from their traditional style.
Pivoting a little bit,
Before
we're going
we
to
transition, I'm sorry. I would just to say that Assassin's Creed 3 came out in 2012, not 2010.
Wow,
I just want to be factually correct.
Okay, Snopes.
I'm sorry. I needed to get that out there. I'm fact-checking myself. I said it wrong, and I...
hit that Donald Trump fake news button.
Wow, how dare you.
Wrong.
I just want to provide correct information. All right, carry on.
That's fair.
Thank you for that. No, that's fair. Dad jokes and keeping us factually correct.
Correct. What more
right.
could you ever ask for?
No, so pivoting a little bit, we're just going to pivot into what hopefully will be a somewhat regular bit on here, if this is even a regular podcast. We're going to go with the beer of the week, which this week is Red Hook IPA. Not any sort of... promotion or anything for them necessarily, but I picked it up on my way over here. I'm a big fan of IPAs myself. Anthony, do you have any
I enjoy
thoughts?
this. It took me a while to get into IPAs, but I've since become a fan of them, and Red Hook IPA definitely does the trick. So, good choice.
Yeah,
Gavin?
it was pretty good. I thought it's a little different. It's lower, I'd say, on the bitterness, and a little bit, stronger on flavor. Not really like a sweeter flavor, but just like a deep, kind of what you would expect, almost like a, I don't know, like wood type flavor, like something,
like a wood chip.
Almost like
Like
something
a
you would get out of a
smoky-
bourbon or something like
yeah.
that.
How do you rate it? Out of a scale of 10, we'll say.
1 to 10.
1 to 10.
Okay, I'm gonna say 6.5
All right.
out of 10.
I was thinking like 6, 7, right in that area. So
Okay.
I guess that meets you in the middle there, 6.5.
Yeah, like a 6. I mean, again, I tend to rate things on the lower side to leave room for the good stuff, but I don't know. It's a lot of pressure to put on a single beer.
Very true. And hopefully this will be something that we discuss regularly, and hopefully it will be a different beer every week, which, thanks to a lot of options here, it definitely is something that I think we'll be able to offer some variety of discussion and material going forward here.
True. So moving into the next news story that we have, our last news story of the day, Paris rolls out sidewalk urinals. So
I was just in Paris this past summer. They did not have these.
So this is fairly new.
Yeah, disappointed?
Not really.
Would you have tried these out?
I'll be honest, I'm not sure I'm the biggest fan of this idea. I have been to Italy, and I have been to France, and I've been to several cities in both. The biggest problem I've had when visiting these cities is the sort of overrun feel that the tourists bring. And it definitely just doesn't feel like your typical day-to-day experience. So, we live where we live, and we go about our day-to-days, and we don't have to deal with, just a press of tourists around us all the time. It definitely adds sort of an artificial feel. And I feel like, these sidewalk urinals, for lack of a better name for it. Yeah. It sort of caters to that. It caters to the tourist aspect. It caters to this sort of artificial, vacation aspect that, I don't know, it just doesn't feel real to me. And not to mention, I would imagine, I haven't seen them personally, but I would imagine they'd be somewhat of an eyesore.
Did you find yourself having to go to the bathroom frequently, though, while you were walking around?
I think you guys are overanalyzing this a little bit. I'm pretty sure they put these things in because there are drunk people at night walking around, taking a piss on the sidewalk or, on somebody's leg by accident. And they just put them in to at least have a slightly cleaner disposal mechanism as opposed to having, drunk people walking around. Because I imagine, we live in the Boston area. We go into Boston and, on the weekends, there are going to be drunk people walking around. It happens.
That's a fact.
And you can frequently find people, taking a leak in an alley somewhere. It's not that hard to find. This is just, I think, them saying, let's at least have a little bit better solution.
True.
I don't know if it's sort of a positive reinforcement of something they don't want people doing in general, but if it's going to happen anyway, they might as well do it in a
have them available for people.
I would agree. Manner. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that said, would you want these on the streets of Boston?
No, definitely not.
It would smell terrible.
Well, they're nice and eco-friendly, and they have.
They present the
according
presentation
to
the
NPR.
It looks just like a trash barrel that you would see out and about. But I guess it's good that they're scattered around because, to quote the great Jeff Goldblum, when you gotta go, you gotta go.
Oh God!
Is that an exact quote from him?
That is a direct quote from Jurassic Park.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Anthony's favorite movie.
Let's go ahead and jump into what I would like to say is our primary or our big discussion. Hopefully, we're going to have one serious discussion every week going forward here. So, pivoting a lot, I would say, and going on to a more serious note, the question I'm going to ask Gavin and Anthony here is, are all actions inherently selfish? So getting a little bit more into the philosophical, maybe a little bit of the psychological side of things. Are actions inherently selfish?
Yeah, it's kind of a big question. It's loaded, there's a lot to unpack, but I think all of our actions are motivated by something, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
And so, even the people who spontaneously do, random things on the street, there's some motivation in their own mind, this is my personality. I'm different. I like to be spontaneous and do crazy things. Mm-hmm. So I think there's always some sort of motivation that you have to kind of dig into to figure out why people do the things they do. I guess I've just defined the word motivation. But
So I'm going to direct it actually towards Anthony here.
Thank you.
Wow.
But
My input's
Anthony,
not good enough.
I would say let's make this let's make this a little bit more personal. And again, not to single you out, but let's make it more personal. Would you say that everything you do is selfish, or would you say that there's things you do out of the goodness of your heart because you are a good person? Out of generosity, out of
Sure.
caring.
I think everybody does at some point in their lives. They're gonna. I don't know. I guess I can't speak for everybody on that part, but I think for the most part, the general population will kind of do things to help others, do good, and have that. I don't know what the word I'm trying to look for is. I guess we'll edit this. Pause out.
Empathy, sympathy, something.
So just out of
Yeah, they'll for example, Dan is always willing to throw some money at the beggars on the street, like homeless people, and is that not
that's
what you're
yeah. No, I would say that's fair.
he's helping
Oh.
them out. I mean, who knows if they're
No, Dan comes across as somebody with a very generous heart and always wants to help people. So if you're using him as an example, then yeah, from everything that we can observe, those seem like selfless acts.
Everything we can observe, those are selfless acts. But I'm going to go ahead, since I'm the one who introduced this subject prior to starting the podcast, I was the one who suggested we talk about this. I feel like I should sort of unpack my manifesto, if you will, on this whole thing here. So when I say all actions are inherently selfish, and I think this is something that I genuinely agree with, I would say anything that is done for the benefit of oneself, we can immediately rule that out as being inherently selfish, obviously. So we can, put all that to the side and then discuss anything that is done for the benefit of another, even to the detriment of one's own self. And I would argue that these two are also inherently selfish. And my thoughts and my reasoning on this here is when you're doing something good for someone else, it's either motivated by, let's say you're a religious person, it's motivated by a hope of reward in the afterlife, or a reward in the eyes of your deity. If you're, let's say, not a religious person, it is motivated by the good feeling it brings you to do something nice for someone else. So, we'll use the example of, giving a couple bucks to, the person that is asking for assistance on the street there. You do that and you feel like, what, I've contributed, I've done something to help better someone else's life, brighten their day. And I'm as guilty of this as anyone else. I mean, I know that, I do nice things for my friends, my family, give gifts at Christmas and everything, and it brings me good, positive feelings. I feel good about myself. I feel like I've done something nice. I feel happy about having brought that happiness to someone else. But it's still about me. It's still my feelings and the benefit that it is to me. So whether it is a religious drive where you hope to get some benefit in the afterlife or from your deity or, in the eyes of your God, or it is a non-religious drive where basically it's about the good feelings you get from doing something good, I see in both these situations, and then obviously factoring back in the purely selfish actions, in all of these situations, every action someone does is inherently selfish and inherently focused on the self.
Yeah, and I mean, just to elaborate further, another example of that would be to do things in the eyes of, the public, right? Something that doesn't even necessarily make you feel good, and maybe this is an extension of your, religious or deity example, that somebody is watching who sees you as a better person, and so you're almost building karma with them or something like that. You're building up a reputation of some sort, even if it doesn't necessarily make you feel good to do the actual act. If somebody knows that you're, contributing, let's say there's a GoFundMe, right? And you might share it on Facebook because you genuinely want somebody, whoever you're raising money for, to do well. But at the same time, you've shared like, oh, I just donated $100 to this cause. And there's a certain, selfishness aspect there too, where, other people see you. And I think that might be one of the biggest motivations for a lot of things that people do in society today in general. Like, look at social media right now. Do you think people just, tweet their mind? Don't answer that directly.
Wrong.
there definitely are. But
Yes,
I'm saying
there are definitely
the majority
people.
of people, I think, go out there and post things, pictures of themselves or like inspirational quotes or whatever it might be,
Sure.
in order to gain likes or whatever else it is, to maybe get that
Message out
recognition.
there too.
Yeah, to gain like recognition,
Yeah.
or I guess that's another thing. Like having those likes pour in gives you that sense of,
Oh,
like that good feeling.
you helped this person,
the little hit of, dopamine in your brain.
Yeah.
But it's always again self-focused,
Well, yeah.
benefit to yourself. And I think we might be a little bit more of the same mind on this one. But I mean, Anthony, do you have any potential, I guess, devil's advocate alternative view on this? Because I'm sure that there's arguments to be made for the other side.
Well, I don't know. You do bring up a good point where you're like, yeah, you can, help out somebody else for the greater good, but then in the end, you end up feeling good about the deed you did. So is that? I think that's a good point that you bring across, because I feel like most people wouldn't necessarily think of that immediately if they're going to go out of their way to help somebody out, or just if they're a generous person and they help someone out. I mean, who knows? You never know. People could just do nice things because they want to do nice things, and they're not trying to feel rewarded for themselves. They just genuinely feel like not being an asshole to people.
Well, here's the only counterexample I can really come up with that sort of goes against the natural order of that innate desire of self-preservation and other things is when you have to make a split decision in an emergency situation to help a complete stranger potentially that you don't know anything about. You may not have ever met them in your life, but you go out there and do something that might put your life on the line in the spur of the moment because they need help, and you don't have time to process any of those things. Like, yeah, maybe it'll make you feel good in the long run, like that is a side effect, but you're not necessarily thinking of that at the moment of doing it. Like somebody who is in a helpless situation and their life depends on you intervening somehow. And maybe the argument could be made, well, if you don't do anything, you're going to feel that guilt of not doing something.
Right.
But at the same time, there are certain situations where it's so, split decision, like you have to make a decision within a second or 2 seconds in order to really have an impact on the situation. If you don't, it's going to be too late. Like, you don't have time to process whether or not it's going to be a good feeling or a bad feeling afterward. All you're thinking about is the other person in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, actually, because if you hadn't mentioned it, I think I would have brought it up. That's sort of the only, I guess, alternative where this sort of argument falls apart, which is the fight or flight situation, where you don't have time to think it out. You don't have time to think about the possible benefit, possible risks to yourself. You make a snap decision. And I want to highlight, I guess, first of all, the rarity of this case, because we're not talking about individuals who are doing this in the line of their job, so military or first responders. That comes with their expected duties on their job. So I would say that we can rule that out. It is that snap decision that is made in that fight or flight moment, where basically you have a decision to make to help someone, often or sometimes, I would say, at the detriment to yourself. And yeah, I would say that might be, at least in my eyes, because it was something I had thought about before this, the only caveat, the only alternative to this sort of universal ruling on this, at least in my eyes, of the inherent selfishness of decisions that people make.
So I think when you say that there's at least one case where people cannot, where people aren't necessarily making an inherently selfish decision, that does open the possibility that, that's not the only situation. It's not proof. It's just saying, since we have a counterexample, we're not saying definitively that everything is selfish. There are situations, potentially, that are unselfish. As far as we can tell based on that analysis, that's an unselfish decision.
True.
And in that case, it doesn't necessarily mean that other thought-out decisions are not selfish. It just means that there's at least one that exists, which leaves the potential for more. We haven't proved that there's no possible way that people can do things unselfishly. I think that's a good counterexample to say there might be other cases on the table that, we just, can't think of, haven't explored. Not premeditated. We're saying that anything premeditated would have to be selfish if that's the case. This is something that's not premeditated, and therefore, since it's not premeditated, you didn't have time to think about what the outcome would be for you in terms of reward, which is the selfishness aspect. But I think what your argument is that if there's any premeditation, then you're already thinking selfishly. The act of premeditation is something selfish.
I think that's fair. So we would have to, I guess, drill down a little bit further, another level there, in terms of premeditated versus non-premeditated or reactional, I guess, you'd say.
So all premeditated actions are probably selfish. Is essentially the conclusion you're heading toward, at least.
Yeah, and I would say that's the case. I would like to be presented with another view on this, but again, I feel like whether you're coming at it from a religious perspective or a non-religious perspective, I feel like that premeditated decision making there. It factors in, and I think it's instinctual really to factor in the benefit to self. It's but just part of your survival instinct, if you will.
It's ingrained in our brain from the early days of man, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. It's certainly, darker or maybe more negative in the eyes of a lot of people, but if we're not thinking about it ourselves, first and foremost, it's definitely hard to have any positive impact on others. Because essentially, if you're not thinking selfishly a lot of the time, then you're probably doing something that could be considered reckless.
Right.
Which I guess in that spur of the moment thing, that case where you don't have time to think about something, that's essentially the definition of a rash or reckless action. Not that it wasn't necessary or it didn't have a good outcome, but without thinking about it, you've made a decision that could affect you negatively, could affect the other person negatively. So it doesn't necessarily mean that thinking selfishly is a negative thing. Because thinking or being rash like that can very much be a negative thing. And premeditation could be an important part of, making a positive out of a situation.
So, the follow-up question on this then is, are we all just assholes?
Well, I think what I just said, if you think the word selfishness is, something you can just equate with being an asshole, then I would say, yeah, we're pretty much all assholes. But if selfish decision-making, has an effect on other people in a positive way, even though you didn't necessarily, that wasn't a consequence you were super focused on, that you're still potentially benefiting other people, inadvertently. So
Inadvertently being the key factor here, I guess.
So you're inadvertently a good person? You're inadvertently not an asshole.
Anthony, any final thoughts on this issue here?
Yeah, not trying to steal the floor.
Or are you just acknowledging the
So
reality that you are inherently a bad person?
Well, yeah, I am.
All right, and I mean this was my theory from the start that I would say this principle holds. But I appreciate you guys discussing it with me, and I appreciate you guys letting me pick this subject of discussion here, since it's been something that's been on my mind quite a bit.
I think, again, we're not necessarily saying that selfishness is a negative trait, but we are saying that it seems to be the case that things are motivated by selfishness. Most actions of humans are motivated selfishly.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think it's very much up for debate whether that's positive or negative. There are certainly cases where we can show that it's negative not to premeditate something. So
Yes, absolutely. And I would say that if there's any alternative views, and if anyone is listening to this podcast, I mean, we could definitely discuss this further, especially if there's any good points of view brought up on this. I mean, I would definitely love to hear, alternative
Yes.
ideas that I, maybe
to hear.
haven't considered yet.
Love to hear some feedback.
All
Or
right.
some response to the question.
I think we've hit all the main points. Hopefully, by the end of this, there's someone out there still listening, and maybe more than one person.
Shout
That would be
out to
ideal.
you who are listening right now.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
hopefully we will be back for another week, and hopefully that one listener will be back next week with us. So, once again, this is Xavier,
This is Gavin.
This is Anthony.
and this has been The
The
Townhouse.